Yo, what is up guys, Ghost here, welcome back to another video, and today I want to take a bit of a look at just why Delta Force is succeeding where Battlefield 2042 has failed. Now, I think judging by the community, there are a lot of people who are enjoying Delta Force. Some people, for them, it's not their cup of tea. But I keep seeing a lot of comments from you guys on my videos, other places on the internet, along the lines of Delta Force has copied so much from Battlefield, and I'm mainly talking, of course, about the Havoc Warfare mode here. If they've copied so much, predominantly from Battlefield 2042, which is heralded as one of the worst, if not the worst, Battlefield games, then why is it being held in such high regard? Why is it being celebrated where Battlefield 2042 was hated? And I think that's a fair point to make, really. If you're somebody who is familiar with Battlefield games, you've played past games, or even if you only played Battlefield 2042, if you jump into Delta Force, you are going to notice lots of things that are strikingly similar. The vehicles, the weapons, the game modes, I mean, they call them attack and defense, but let's not beat about the bush, it's breakthrough. Delta Force calls it capture, but it's simply conquest from Battlefield. I don't think anybody can objectively look at the game and honestly say that Delta Force have not copied like a good 60-70% from Battlefield. And I think people were surprised to see that they've also copied a lot of the most hated things from Battlefield 2042, such as the specialist system, which in Delta Force they're called operators. And once people aren't writing essays about how much they love the operators or anything like that, people, I think, could do without them. They're also not receiving the same amount of hate that the specialists received back in Battlefield 2042 when that game originally released. So I want to delve into a little bit as to why I think that is. I also posted this over on Twitter and asked you guys of your opinions on it just to see if you had anything different from what I was already thinking. So we're going to get into all of that here in this video. Guys, as always, if you do enjoy the videos here on the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Plenty more Delta Force and Battlefield to come from me in the near future. I'm not biased really towards one game or the other. I'm enjoying both of them for what they are, and I will definitely be covering both of them, so if that's something you're interested in, then make sure you are subscribed. Cheers. So I think most people would think I'm going to list off a number of features in the game, a number of mechanics perhaps, that Delta Force does better than Battlefield, or maybe improves upon, or features that it brings that Battlefield doesn't have. But actually, I believe that Delta Force's success mainly boils down to circumstance and timing. So without a shadow of a doubt, I think the biggest reason that Delta Force is being so much more optimistically received than Battlefield 2042 was is because there isn't really much of a legacy. There is a massive legacy behind the Battlefield franchise. We hold that franchise in very high regard, and sometimes that nostalgia that we have is almost difficult, if not impossible, for DICE and EA to live up to. But let's not forget, they certainly didn't help matters when they started buttering us up, saying things like Battlefield 2042 is going to be a love letter to the Battlefield community, and it's going to be like Battlefield 4 brought into the modern era, and all of those things that they said to build up hype around the game and to sell us on the idea of the game, and then it turned out to be anything but that. It was a complete and total broken mess. We don't need to go into all of that. You guys know the story, and we've been over it so many times. But I think, especially after some prior failures from Battlefield 5, the expectations for Battlefield 2042, with it going back to the modern era and all of that, just really were sky high, and they simply failed to meet those expectations. Now, if you take a look at Delta Force, yes, this is a game based on a previous franchise, but I would wager that most of you watching this video have barely even heard of Delta Force. And maybe if you're around my age, you will have heard of the game and be familiar with it, but it's been so long since we've had a Delta Force game that I had no idea what a modern Delta Force game would look like in this day and age. So therefore, I didn't really have any solid expectations of the game in that regard, and then it also turned out that it was being published by Tencent and also developed by a Chinese studio called Team Jade. And I think when people caught wind of that, they were a little bit apprehensive about the game. They judged it maybe before they'd even really heard anything about it, based on other Chinese games that were knockoff of other games. And I guess you could argue that Delta Force is a Chinese knockoff of Battlefield in some regards, but it actually really surprised me. My expectations were not only met, but it actually turned out to be better than what I expected. I essentially didn't really expect anything from the game at all. I had covered it a couple of videos here on my channel, and I thought, you know what, I'll keep an eye on this game and see if it's any good, but if it would have completely flopped and been a terrible game, I wouldn't have been surprised at all. But that's not what we expect from DICE and EA, right? We hold them in high regard, and we expect whatever product they deliver to us to be an amazing Battlefield experience. And so I think that's why, really, people are giving Delta Force a much easier time. However, that is certainly not the only reason. There's also just been a really, really long wait for the next Battlefield game. That is no secret. Battlefield players are looking for something to play. Content has come to an end for Battlefield 2042, and, you know, there is something to be said for a new, shiny toy. The grass is always greener on the other side. Any of those sayings that you want to apply to this, I think people just like to sink their teeth into something unknown, something new, a little bit unfamiliar, unlock some new goodies in a game, and just have something to grind again. And this is definitely not going to replace the Battlefield franchise. It's not going to shut down EA and DICE and stop them from making Battlefield games, at least unless they completely drop the ball with the next title. But it is at the very least a welcome distraction until the next game releases next year. And they have the perfect timing window right now. There is absolutely nothing coming out of DICE and EA until next year, and we're probably not even going to hear any solid details or see any hype starting to build around the next Battlefield until like summertime, maybe at the very earliest Easter, and Delta Force is set to release towards the end of this year and then early next year for console. So they have a perfect release timing here. They can capture most of the Battlefield crowd, and then of course they have their extraction mode, which is way better than the extraction offering that we saw in Battlefield 2042, which was called Hazard Zone. Now, that being said, there are certainly several things that Delta Force really does have going for it that Battlefield 2042 simply doesn't. So firstly, the performance of the game is absolutely fantastic. It's running on Unreal Engine 4, which is a pretty old engine at this point, but it's very tried and true. The Frostbite engine is notoriously difficult to work with for Battlefield games, and even now, even though Battlefield 2042 has been out for 3 years at this point, it still runs worse than the alpha test of Delta Force. I think way more people are going to be able to play this game. Not only that, but it's also free to play, which goes a long way, so there's no investment for the players who jump in and give it a try. And then I think Team Jade have been incredibly smart about this. They are clearly trying to target the Battlefield community, the Battlefield audience, and they know the pain points of Battlefield 2042. They've been watching like hawks to see what we've been complaining about and what we want to see improve with the game, and they have made sure that they hit those marks with Delta Force, that they improve upon those points. So for example, Delta Force has a scoreboard on release. It has working mouse input. There is an absolutely incredible gunsmith system in Delta Force as well. Not that the weapon customization in Battlefield 2042 is necessarily bad. I do think weapon customization has a limit where it starts to get a little bit too complicated, convoluted, and confusing, and it's sort of like diminishing returns at that point. You know, you don't want to make things too complicated, and I do think Delta Force's system is right on the cusp of being there, but it has to be said, it is a great gunsmith system in general. Now, the maps in Delta Force are not great. They definitely need some improvements, especially Ascension if you're on the attacking side and you're moving up the beachfront, and even more so if you happen to be playing their conquest mode, their capture mode, whatever they call it. It is very hard to take the beachfront, move up, and take back enemy territory when they have all of this high ground. So, you know, the maps are far from perfect in Delta Force, but the maps in Battlefield 2042, if you recall, when that game released, and maybe some of you guys weren't around then, were absolutely terrible. There was no cover whatsoever. So to be honest, for Delta Force to one-up DICE on map design, especially for an early release like this, that's a pretty easy win for them. You know, first impressions are everything this day in the gaming industry. If you make a bad first impression, your game is pretty much done. It doesn't matter if it's early access, If it's an alpha test, a beta test, whatever it is, as soon as players get their hands on that game, they are going to judge it for whatever it is, especially if they've had to pay money to gain access to it, which most people who played the beta for Battlefield 2042 had to do, because I think there was like you pre-order the game and you get in early. Delta Force has been offering up its alpha test and now the free demo on the Steam Next Fest absolutely free, and I think it's made a far better first impression to players than Battlefield 2042 did on its release. Something else I think Delta Force are doing especially well is interacting and listening to the community. The Delta Force official Twitter account, the moderators over on the Discord, they are actively interacting with content creators, players, everybody in the community. They're talking and taking any criticism that we have to give them. They're taking it to heart, they're listening to it, and they're making an effort to try and change the game for the better, which I really feel like Battlefield and just EA and DICE in general need to improve at. It's the atmosphere that I get from them is that they've got their nose up above the clouds, like they're better than everybody else. It's the players' fault for not liking the game, and I think they really need to sort of get over that, like get over themselves, I suppose. I think they certainly started to do that once they listened to us and began to improve the game, but even then they kept making decisions that went completely against the will of the community. It's just a very different atmosphere with how Delta Force are approaching their community here. So all of those things, I think, do go a long way in terms of player perception and how they are ready to receive a game when it releases. Now, that being said, guys, I am not biased on like one game or the other. I play both games. I think Battlefield 2042, for what it's worth, is a pretty decent Battlefield game right now. It was terrible where it released. It's decent now. It's still far from being my favorite Battlefield game. And at the same time, I think Delta Force is also a decent game, but also far from being perfect. I don't like the fact that there are AI bots in there. I especially don't like the fact that they are not marked with a suffix to tell you that it's AI. I hate the vehicles, especially the air vehicles. Like, they are nowhere near as good as Battlefield 2042's vehicles, and we all know that Battlefield 2042's vehicles aren't even that great to begin with. I think the movement is a little bit too slow, lethargic, almost frustrating to play the game. You do get used to the movement to a certain degree. The visual recoil, I think that really needs to be toned down. You pretty much have to stack control and stability on a weapon so that you don't get the recoil and you don't flinch all over the place like crazy when you're being shot. Any other loadout is simply going to be suboptimal. So yeah, there are definitely problems with Delta Force, things I do want to see resolved. But overall, I do think the future of this game could be bright. Now, just as a final word here, I'm not sure how accurate I am in the statement that I'm about to give, but I do feel like a lot of the hype around Delta Force has been artificially created. So anywhere you look, and for me especially, I maybe see more things than you guys do because I'm a content creator and I'm in certain Discords and whatnot, but Tencent, obviously, they have an ungodly amount of money, and they have been pushing a lot of money into marketing Delta Force. They haven't come up with any super fancy trailers, to be honest with you. Like the trailer for Battlefield 2042 did, I feel, a much better marketing job than any trailer that we have seen for Delta Force. Most of the marketing hype has come from these big content creators. So I'm certainly not talking about people like myself. I'm talking about these huge guys out there who've been paid money to fly over to China and like do Q&As with them and stuff. And I want you to watch this little excerpt from a recent Q&A that was posted on their channel. So they flew out a few content creators, Get Right, who is a very famous Counter-Strike player, Olaf and Alu. I'm not familiar with the two of them, but what I want you to take notice of here is how obvious it is that they are reading from a script, that they are acting, and it almost looks as though they are thoroughly miserable to be there talking to these developers from Team Jade about Delta Force. Just have a listen to this.
It's also a pleasure to have several professional players join us for today's program.
I heard that you are very interested in our game and have a lot of questions. This is a great opportunity to discuss them with everyone.
Yes, I believe that your questions are also those that players would like to know about. So let's start. Who wants to go first?
Okay, let me start. You know that as a professional FPS player, game feeling is very important. How do you optimize the game feeling?
How does Delta Force guarantee stability and server quality?
See you next time.
See ya.
I mean, come on, dude. You at least have to pretend like you want to be there. You at least have to pretend like you're not reading from a script. I think it's obvious to all of us, right, that they have set up the questions that they want these content creators to ask the devs. They're reading it off of a screen or a script or whatever, and then the developers are telling them some pre-prepared answers. Why don't they just come out and tell us this information? If this is what they want to convey to us, why don't they just tell us instead of paying probably tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars for content creators to go over there and do the same thing? So there's been a lot of this stuff going on. This is just like one example of it, but it does almost worry me a little bit just how much money they are throwing at content creators to play the game, interact with the game, talk about the game, etc. I know that's nothing new. It happens with every game, right? That's just like part of the deal. And sure, I've done sponsored videos for various things myself, and that is kind of how it works, right? They tell you, hey, I want you to say this, this, and this. You can do it in your own words, but you at least try to like sell the product as if you're interested in it. These guys, I swear to God, they're being held there at gunpoint. It looks really weird and sketchy, like very unnatural and artificially created. In fact, I'm not even sure they're real humans. I think they may just be robots. Anywho, on that bombshell, guys, I'm going to leave it there for today. Let me know what you think about this. Like I said, I see these comments from you guys all the time of people just saying, why are people so hyped for Delta Force? If they've taken so much from Battlefield, and especially Battlefield 2042, why is that being celebrated? Why is that a good thing? Those are my thoughts on it. I would love to hear yours. Leave them down below. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys in the next video.